Throughout most of Amphoreus, we have largely been following the exploits of the Trailblazer and Dan Heng. The third junior member of the Nameless, however, has mostly been absent. From the moment we reached the planet, no one really knew what had happened to March. Bits and pieces were hinted at here and there, but never the full picture. With the release of the 3.6 Trailblaze quest, however, we now have the full story. So in this video, I'm going to give you an overview of everything that has happened to March 7th while she was on Amphoreus. Before we get into that though, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. As you might have guessed, this video will spoil pretty much the entire story of the 3.6 Trailblaze quest. So if you're still playing through it, then consider this your obligatory spoiler warning. I'm going to split this summary up into roughly 3 sections. What happened to March when she first arrives, what Evernight has been doing, and how their story concludes. I'll try to keep it in a mostly chronological order so you can follow her journey from start to finish, but that will mean that it won't be the exact same as what we saw in 3.6. I will also omit certain details related to the larger story happening in Amphoreus, as I mostly want to focus on March and Evernight here. Let's start from the very beginning. March 7th entered Amphoreus long before the Trailblazer and Dan Heng had even arrived. When the Astral Express reached the vicinity of Amphoreus, March's consciousness was seized and forcibly pulled into the simulation. Luckily, a ripple of remembrance protected her from the firewall set up by Ligus, and she ended up in the tomb of the Nameless Titan. This is where March started her journey, and unlike the Trailblazer, she had practically emerged at the very end. Unfortunately, she did not have the right access permissions to enter the tomb, and the Scepter's safety protocols activated, much to March's confusion. Instead of erasing her, however, it instead threw her deep into its extrapolations, and when she woke up, she found herself in the Abyss of Fate, the Time Titan's dwelling. She eventually leaves this location and begins traveling around Amphoreus. However, throughout her journey, she was unable to interact with anyone and nobody could see her. This was largely due to March not being part of Amphoreus' memories. Every human in Amphoreus is born from the memories of the World-Bearer carried over after each reset. Since March had entered in sort of the unofficial way and kind of in the middle of a cycle, she wasn't technically registered. On top of that, Amphoreus is functionally a simulation, and entering this world isn't done so physically, so only her mind had actually entered. This made her something similar to a mimetic entity with no physical form to speak of, even within the simulation that is Amphoreus. This incorporeal form and the fact that she wasn't registered as part of the world might also be why the Scepter's defense protocols couldn't erase her within the tomb despite being able to do so with Cyrene. Regardless, she trailblazed across Amphoreus as a mimetic entity, seeing the world and witnessing its people. In total, she had spent 97 days in the simulation, practically all alone. Near the end of her journey, March eventually learns about the impenetrable firewall that surrounds Amphoreus. This was likely the reason behind why those who had entered Amphoreus from the outside were never seen again. It's something Cyrene comments on as well when March first meets her prior to entering Amphoreus. This basically worries March because she knows that the Nameless are on their way here. She tries several things to help her companions, but because she is functionally a ghost, her actions go unnoticed and end up becoming parts of rumors and folktales. At the height of her desperation, she turns to the being that has lied dormant within her, Evernight. Now, Evernight has been with March as early as Argenti's companion quest, where she made her first appearance. Here, she surfaces yet again in response to March's cry for help, as well as the danger she finds herself in. March essentially strikes a deal with Evernight to ensure the trailblazing journey of the Nameless can continue. More specifically, she requests that Evernight protect the Trailblazer and Dan Heng from Ligus' firewall, ensure they are not captured by the Memo Snatchers of the Garden, and find a way to prevent Iron Tomb from ending their journey. In order to fulfill this request, Evernight tells March that March needs to use her memories to fuel Evernight so that she may take action. Evernight warns her, however, that doing this may cause this version of March to outright disappear. Even if she wasn't totally gone, she might end up losing parts of herself in the process as a result of burning away her memories. In the face of these warnings, however, March steals her resolve and offers up all of her current memories to empower Evernight, who uses the Memoria to then neutralize the Amphoreus firewall, which allows both the Trailblazer and Dan Heng to enter safely. Evernight also protects their bodies in a bubble of Memoria, as only their minds enter Amphoreus. Having burnt herself away, March 7's body becomes an empty husk. From this point on, Evernight basically takes over and pilots March's body, and March herself is presumed to be gone. Evernight hides within the cracks and crevices of time by essentially hacking the Time Titan and hid her tracks by striking a deal with the Titan of Earth. She does this to deceive Zenda and hide from him while putting into motion plans to fulfill March's wish. Now, what Evernight functionally does is pretty straightforward. You see, the Era Nova basically initiates extrapolations for the next cycle based on memories of the preceding cycle carried by the World-Bearer. Put simply, every new cycle is built off of the previous one. Evernight wants to filter the World-Bearer's memories, which is currently with the Trailblazer, to influence the next cycle. More specifically, she wants to remove memories of the Chrysos heirs, Amphoreus' humanity, and those she deems as flawed individuals. She is doing this to create the perfect conditions to fight Iron Tomb so that it increases the chances for others to win and thus ensures trailblazing can continue in accordance to March 7's wishes. But that's not all. You see, throughout the 30 million cycles of the recent past, Cyrene has painstakingly saved and stored every bit of this information in the tomb of the Nameless Titan. Evernight's plans also involve destroying all these memories, emotions, and stories Cyrene has recorded. Doing this would completely annihilate the Scepter's operating logic, and Iron Tomb would lose the foundations in which it was built on. This would result in weakening Iron Tomb further, as well as setting Amphoreus free. Evernight's logic is that it's better to sacrifice all these unimportant memories to ensure victory against Iron Tomb instead of having even a 1% chance of losing. Aside from her mission to ensure the continuity of the Trailblaze, Evernight was also actively protecting Dan Heng and the Trailblazer. Earlier I mentioned that she had placed their physical bodies in a sort of protective bubble, but Evernight also kept their minds shielded within Amphoreus. While Dan Heng managed to leave Amphoreus with the help of Screwlum, the Trailblazer was still stuck here. In order to both protect the Trailblazer and continue on with her plans, Evernight essentially trapped them in a recurring dream or memory zone built out of their past memories. This is what we see when the Trailblazer appeared back in Penacony. Luckily, Cyrene appears and rescues the Trailblazer, and in order to protect them from Evernight, she takes the Trailblazer into the deepest part of their memories. This doesn't last long, however, as Evernight eventually finds them and explains that the Trailblazer was sent here so that they may wait out the chaos happening on Amphoreus. To put it simply, Evernight is working to dismantle Amphoreus and has placed the Trailblazer here to shield them from whatever is going on outside. She's basically protecting the Trailblazer by technically putting them in a cage, a rather twisted perversion of what March wanted. Anyways, the Trailblazer is saved yet again, this time by Sunday, through the use of his Harmony tuning, which undoes the memory zone's grasp on the Trailblazer. This predictably doesn't last long either, as Evernight finds them and eventually pulls the Trailblazer back into the memory zone. So during this period, Evernight was basically protecting her companions, drowning Amphoreus in a tide of Memoria to weaken Iron Tomb, and was actively opposing the Memo Keepers of the Garden, all to fulfill and safeguard the wishes March 7 had made. Now earlier, I mentioned that when March made her deal with Evernight, she essentially burnt herself out and seemingly died. In truth, however, March didn't actually disappear. What happened was that at the moment where she gave her memories and body to Evernight, March became an empty spirit devoid of memories. In a split second, she hid herself within the Time Titan's veil at the Abyss of Fate. When Dan Heng and the Trailblazer first arrived in Oronix's location and took a picture of the Titan, the shutter sound of her camera triggered faint memories in the now near-death March. This allowed her to relapse for just a moment, and she immediately entered her camera and took refuge there from that point forward. March basically banked her survival entirely on a promise she had made with Dan Heng and the Trailblazer, where if she wasn't able to journey with them, then they would help her take pictures. This is why the camera's memories became full after they met Oronix, and why Oronix called out to Mother as March was there with them. Despite finding some respite, March was still technically an empty soul since she had given up her memories, So how was she able to remember? Well, it's because of the memories contained in her camera. Each picture acted as a backup, and she managed to learn and recall her journey with the Nameless by taking in the memories of these photos. When the Trailblazers shared their experiences with Cyrene, the memories of the Express was shared with March as well, given she was in the camera. March admits that she doesn't have a full recollection of everything, but enough to place her trust in her companions. So ever since then, March has been working with Cyrene to set up a face-to-face with Evernight. This is what we see at the end of the story in 3.6, where Evernight was pulled into the light cone created by March and Cyrene. Here, March 7th and Cyrene make a plea to both Evernight's emotions and logic, and essentially convinces Evernight that her plans are flawed, despite them coming from a largely benevolent place. Even without Evernight, Ceridra's law was revealed to have taken into account the possibility of Amphoreus being taken advantage of by outsiders. In such an occurrence, Iron Tomb, along with every faction present, would have been forcibly expunged from Amphoreus. With this law present, if Evernight had continued with her plans to change the Era Nova, Ceridra's law would have activated, destroying everything, the good guys included. March reveals that she was aware of all of this, but wanted to at least try reasoning with Evernight first. There is a rather insightful and endearing thing March mentions while taking Evernight through their past memories. She mentions that a camera can only capture fleeting moments akin to remembrance, but connecting them into a story is closer to the philosophy of the Trailblaze. I like the idea that for all of Fu Li's efforts, the universe that they aim to recreate is functionally void of substance, as they are only a snapshot of what once was. Only through experiencing the story in its entirety and taking the journey can one appreciate the meaning and nuances behind those pictures. Even though March started off as an apparition, given she wasn't part of Amphoreus' memories, by the end, she managed to carve her name into the great epic of this dying world. Seeing the depth of her memories and the meaning behind her Trailblaze journey, as well as the connections with her companions, Evernight finally relents. She willingly agrees to give back control of March's body along with the power of oblivion. As a last service to her, Evernight burns away the memory that refers to March as the pure child of Anasrava. What repercussions this might have for the future is unknown, and it's unclear if Evernight's personality is truly gone. Following this, March finally reunites with the Trailblazer and Dan Heng, and with the Nameless now all receiving their power-ups, prepare to face their final obstacle, the Ravager Iron Tomb. Overall, despite her rather black and white approach, at the core of her actions, Evernight was only ever looking out for March. Her choices, while appearing rather devoid of morals and even dark at times, all came from an obsessive need to protect March and honor her wishes. I do hope we see more of her in the future given her ties to the Enigmata, but I'm also excited to learn what other memories might be hiding away within March. I have a feeling this entity might actually resurface in the future given the little chat she had with Black Swan, who may now be her new vessel. Either way, that's a topic for another video, and with that, I'll end the video here. I hope that this has helped those of you who are maybe a bit confused with some of the details in the story related to Evernight and March. If I happen to miss out some detail, do mention it down below. Do you think that we will see Evernight in the future, and when will Enigmata make an appearance? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found the video entertaining or even helpful, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.